This is the story of how Canada's evolving digital regulatory environment forced a strategic pivot at Descartes Systems Group, one of the world's largest logistics software providers. It is an examination of how sovereign data laws and the Digital Charter Implementation Act are fundamentally altering the architecture of global supply chain management. In the final months of 2024 and leading into the early fiscal cycles of 2025, the Canadian government accelerated its push towards stringent data privacy and cybersecurity frameworks. The most notable driver of this shift is Bill C-27, an ambitious piece of legislation designed to modernize the nation's private sector privacy laws. For a company like Descartes Systems Group, which operates a global logistics network spanning over 160 countries, these rules represent more than just a legal hurdle. They signify a definitive shift from the borderless, cloud-first era toward a more complex model of digital sovereignty. The Waterloo-based firm manages millions of daily transactions for airlines, trucking companies, and customs brokers. In this high-stakes environment, data is the primary asset. As Canadian regulators increased the requirements for data residency and algorithmic transparency, the company had to reassess how it stores, processes, and protects the sensitive trade data of its global clientele. This move marks the beginning of a broader trend where geography once again dictates the terms of the digital world. The introduction of the Consumer Privacy Protection Act and the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act within Canada has necessitated a more modular approach to client architecture. For years, the tech industry operated under the assumption that data could flow freely to wherever processing was most efficient. That era is ending. Descartes now finds itself at the forefront of an industry-wide re-engineering effort. Engineers are now tasked with building silos where open pipes once existed. They must ensure that Canadian data remains within specified jurisdictions while still feeding into the essential global network that keeps trade moving. The internal mechanics of this transition reveal a growing friction between legacy global systems and new localized mandates. Descartes Systems operates on a high-margin recurring revenue model that historically relied on the seamless flow of information across international lines. Financial reports from the 2025 fiscal year, covering the period ending January 31, 2025, indicate that the company maintains a robust financial position. Revenues reached $651 million, a 14% increase over the previous year, with services revenue accounting for 91% of that total. However, the operational complexity of maintaining dual standards is rising. Income from operations stood at $181 million, and while profits are growing, the cost of compliance is becoming a permanent fixture on the balance sheet. This isn't just about simple software updates or patching security holes. It is about re-engineering the very plumbing of global trade to satisfy a new era of digital border guards. The pressure is not coming solely from the legislative side. Descartes' own research, including its 2025 Global Forwarder and Broker Benchmark Study, found that 60% of industry leaders view global instability as a primary threat. Furthermore, 30% of respondents cited regulatory compliance systems as a top investment priority for the coming 2 years. This data suggests that the shift Descartes is making is not just a reaction to government pressure, but a strategic move to secure a competitive advantage. In a world where 67% of logistics firms view technology as fundamental to their growth, being the first to master compliant architecture is a massive differentiator. The company's recent expansion into new development facilities in Quebec also signals a commitment to localizing its research and development efforts to better align with provincial and federal mandates, like Quebec's Law 25. When we look at the global context, Canada's approach does not exist in a vacuum. It mirrors the stringent requirements of the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation and the rising tide of data nationalism in Asia. By aligning its digital rules with these international high standards, Canada is effectively forcing firms like Descartes to adopt a highest common denominator policy for security. Market analysts observe that this creates a defensive moat for established players who can afford the massive engineering overhead, while simultaneously raising the barrier for smaller competitors who lack the $284 million in adjusted EBITDA that Descartes reported in 2025. This financial muscle allows the firm to absorb the costs of sovereign cloud configurations that smaller startups simply cannot manage. The technological implications are equally significant. The Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, or AIDA, introduces requirements for human oversight, transparency, and the mitigation of biased outcomes in high-impact systems. For Descartes, which has been integrating AI to reduce screening false positives by up to 60%, these rules require a fundamental rethink of how their algorithms are audited. It is no longer enough for a system to be efficient. It must now be explainable to a regulator. This move toward glass box AI is a direct result of the Canadian legislative environment. The shift requires a move away from centralized black box processing toward distributed systems where data provenance and algorithmic logic can be verified at the local level. For the broader market and the average consumer, these architectural changes at Descartes reflect a silent transformation in how the world moves goods. When a logistics backbone reconfigures its data handling, it impacts everything from the speed of customs clearance to the cost of imported electronics. The shift toward more rigid digital rules suggests that the era of move fast and break things has been replaced by a period of comply or be excluded. Descartes Systems' pivot is a proactive response to a world where data is treated with the same weight as physical cargo. As the company continues to acquire smaller specialized firms, investing heavily in its global trade intelligence suite, it reinforces the idea that the next decade of tech leadership belongs to those who can master the art of the digital border. The story of Descartes in 2025 is not one of a company struggling, but of a company evolving to survive a more fragmented world. With a net income of $143 million and a service revenue growth of 13%, the firm is proving that compliance can be profitable if handled with enough scale. However, the requirement for constant adaptation is relentless. The Canadian government's digital ambition for 2024-2025 emphasizes that data and information are now foundational to national security. In this environment, a software company is no longer just a service provider. It is a critical infrastructure operator. The quiet restructuring currently underway in Waterloo and across Descartes' global offices is a signal that the architecture of the global economy is being rewritten. As we look toward the remainder of 2025 and into 2026, the success of this transition will be measured by the company's ability to maintain its 76% gross margin while navigating increasingly divergent international laws. The compliance shift is a move toward a more resilient, albeit more expensive, digital world. It is a world where the physical borders we thought were disappearing in the internet age are being reconstructed in the data centers of the world's most vital companies. For Descartes, rethinking client architecture wasn't just a choice. It was an admission that the globalized, borderless web is a thing of the past. The future belongs to those who can build the digital walls and the gates that allow trade to pass through them securely. This transformation also highlights the changing role of the Chief Information Officer and the Chief Legal Officer in multinational corporations. At Descartes, these roles are becoming inextricably linked. The decision to localize data or reconfigure a server cluster in Toronto instead of a centralized hub in the United States is now a board-level discussion involving geopolitical risk as much as technical latency. This is the new reality for any firm handling high-impact data. The 2025 fiscal year was a milestone for Descartes, marking a 22% increase in diluted earnings per share, but it also marked a point of no return in its relationship with the state. The era of the global company is being replaced by the multi-local company. The shift at Descartes is a micro-study of a global phenomenon. As nations like Canada assert their digital sovereignty, the very nature of the internet is changing. We are moving away from a single unified web toward a collection of interconnected but distinct digital territories. For the logistics industry, which has spent the last 30 years trying to eliminate borders, this is a profound irony. The companies that once specialized in helping goods cross physical borders must now spend their resources helping data cross digital ones. Descartes Systems Group's quiet reconfiguration of its client architecture is the first major chapter in this new history of global commerce. It is a story of adaptation, of the power of the state, and of the enduring importance of where exactly your data lives. By the end of 2025, the impact of these changes will be felt across every industry that relies on the global logistics network. From the pharmaceutical company waiting on temperature-controlled shipments to the retailer managing a just-in-time inventory, the invisible architecture of Descartes software will be what keeps the shelves full. But that architecture will no longer look like the centralized systems of the past. It will be a complex, modular, and highly regulated web of regional nodes, designed to satisfy the digital ambitions of a world that has decided that data is too important to be left to the market alone. The quiet but important shift in Waterloo is the sound of the world's trade systems adjusting to a new and much more serious reality.